It is not impermanence that makes us suffer. What makes us suffer is wanting things to be permanent when they are not. So said celebrated spiritual teacher Thich Nhat Hanh. Years ago, I remember hearing Thich Nhat Hanh tell an ancient Buddhist teaching story. There once was a wise queen who ruled the land with wisdom and compassion. She was beloved by her people and cherished by her advisors for her humility, which was the source of her successful reign. A decade into her rule, she realized she was becoming complacent, filled with a quiet pleasure of self-satisfaction. She felt like she was losing touch with something important that had given her perspective to rule successfully. She wanted a touchstone to recall her to her best self again. She wanted a spiritual tool on which to re-anchor her awareness. The queen called for her advisors and asked them to find her the one thing that could wisely guide her through sad times and happy times. The one thing that would give her strength in the sad times and appreciation for the happy times. The advisors went away and discussed this amongst themselves. What was the one thing that would wisely guide her through sad times and in happy times? The one thing that would give her strength for the sad times and let her appreciate the happy times. When they returned to the queen, they handed her a gold ring to put on her finger. On the ring was inscribed, "This too shall pass. This too shall pass." Strength in the sad times, appreciation for the happy times. This too shall pass. I thought of that story when I heard the news that Thich Nhat Hanh had died on Friday. I Googled his name and brought up his picture on my computer screen. I felt sad. This too shall pass. I remembered when I first picked up a book by Thich Nhat Hanh and read his teachings that changed my spiritual life. I felt happy. This too shall pass. I thought of some painful and difficult changes that had happened in my life since I first read his book. I felt sad. This too shall pass. I reached down and scratched my dog Grayson behind his ears. I felt happy. This too shall pass. I looked across the room at the urns containing the cremated remains of two wonderful but now dead dogs, Shadow and Tucker. And I felt sad. This too shall pass. I sat down at the kitchen table and tasted the delicious warmth of my takeout dinner of shrimp curry and rice. I felt happy. This too shall pass. Adam Brady, a yoga teacher and author who I quoted before Karen's dance, writes, "Life is perpetually in flux, and change is an inevitable constant. As the Greek philosopher Heraclitus reminds us, no person ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river and they are not the same person. Impermanence lies at the heart of our lived reality." In a short blog titled appropriately Impermanence, Thich Nhat Hanh wrote, The Buddha taught that everything is impermanent. Flowers, tables, mountains, political regimes, bodies, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. We cannot find anything that is permanent. Flowers decompose, but knowing this does not prevent us from loving and appreciating those flowers. In fact, we are able to love them more because we know how to treasure them while they are still alive. If we learn to look at a flower in a way that impermanence is revealed to us, when it dies, we will not suffer. Thich Nhat Hanh continued, when we look deeply into impermanence, we see that things change because causes and conditions change. Without impermanence, life could not be. Without impermanence, the little child could not grow into a beautiful young adult. Without impermanence, oppressive political regimes would never change. We think impermanence makes us suffer. The Buddha gave us the example of a dog that was hit by a stone and got angry at the stone. It's not impermanence that makes us suffer. What makes us suffer is wanting things to be permanent when they are not. Thanks to impermanence, everything is possible. Life itself is possible. If a grain of corn is not impermanent, it can never be transformed into a stalk of corn. If the stalk were not impermanent, it could never provide us with the ear of corn to eat. Now, on a purely intellectual level, I completely get the idea of all things changing. I get the idea that change is the one thing that is permanent in life. But emotionally, I struggle because there are lots of things that I don't want to change. Understanding something is different than being able to live it. Carol Woods, writing in fall of 1999 edition of Insight Journal, asks, when something in my life that I value or that's important to me changes, do I say, oh, well, the causes and conditions that allowed for that to exist have changed and it's passing away? This is the way of life. Honestly, that certainly is not my first spontaneous reaction to the loss of cherished things. Do I say, my father has Parkinson's disease and can't really see anymore? It's just because causes and conditions have changed. No, of course not. I experience the pain of seeing him suffer. That's normal. And I experience compassion for him. But there's also an edge of panic. What can I do to stop this from happening? What can I do to fix it? We respond like this to our own bodies, to people we love, to relationships changing, to losing a job, even down to your knee starting to hurt in the middle of a meditation or an exercise. Our basic response to change, even though we know all conditions are subject to change, is something has gone wrong, and this is changing. If I can figure it out, if I can stop it from happening, I will do that because I don't want to feel the pain or loss that come with change. Carol Woods continues. Let's face it, on a very basic level, we want pleasure to linger, to hang around. We don't really want unpleasant things to happen. That's how we move through life. No one tends to grieve too much when the headache goes away. No one tends to grieve too much when the really bad weather turns nice. Oh, shucks, the pleasant is back, darn. Rather, we think, now things are fine. I can flow with that. So, impermanence is a problem only when the pleasant changes. Impermanence is a problem only when the pleasant changes. We've wrestled with this human truth in unparalleled ways since the first case of COVID was confirmed in Washington State on January 20th, 2020, 2 years ago, this past week. These last 2 years of worldwide pandemic forced us all into an unwanted dance with impermanence. Faced with this colossal change that came so quickly, we could fight against the fact that our lives as we knew it had changed, or we could stop struggling and try to accept what is. But then, what is kept changing, and we needed to learn to live within a new what is until that changed as well. We know this goes on, and today, 2 years later, the landscape of what is keeps changing. This is exhausting existential work. And after almost 2 years, I know that many of us feel stretched to an emotional and physical breaking point. As I shared in a sermon last year at about this time, this is not the world we wanted. This is not the life we want. But dear ones, this is the life that we have been given. In this moment in time, this is the life that we have. We can't alter our circumstances. But what we do with it and how we respond within it, what we create together out of it, is up to us. I think that one of the most self-damaging things we do is hold on to the vision of what we wanted, even after we know that what we wanted will never come to be. Holding on to what once was but is no more keeps us living in the not now rather than the now. One of the great spiritual challenges of life is to live not in what should be, but in what is. The image that comes to mind is a person standing upright in the center of a very large upright circle. You're perfectly vertical. Your arms and legs are like the spokes of a wheel, and your hands are holding tight to that wheel, keeping you upright, perfectly vertical, perfectly balanced, perfectly centered, and thus perfectly content with the way things are. But that wheel is the wheel of time. That wheel is the cycle of change. That wheel is the wheel of chance. The wheel is the wheel of impermanence, which means it is constantly turning, and if you keep holding on at the same place to the same thing, then you too will start to turn, and you will go from being upright and centered to being off balance, off center, all akimbo. The only way to regain equilibrium and a sense of balance is to let go of what you have been holding on to. The only way to remain equilibrium is to reach out and hold onto the something new that is now there above you. We must hold onto the reality of this moment, which will also change because nothing stays static. Everything is changing. Everyone is changing. As the recently deceased Stephen Sondheim wrote, I'm changing, you're changing, everything is melting away. This is hard spiritual work. This is hard life work. But it is the work we are called to do this day, tomorrow, and far into days beyond our knowing. This is how we survive a changing pandemic. This is how we thrive within a changing pandemic. The only way to regain equilibrium and a sense of balance is to let go again and again of what we've been holding on to and reach out and touch the something here in this moment of right now. This is how we open ourselves to the beauty waiting in this moment of now. This is how we discover the gift the universe offers in this moment of now. This is how we live more fully in this moment of now, even as we know this too shall pass. My dear ones, this is hard spiritual work. You know this. It's hard life work. You know this. But the good news is, we need not do this alone. We cannot do this alone. We have each other. We have this church community. And we have this Unitarian Universalist faith that itself is ever-changing, ever-growing, but ever-rooted in a belief that we are called to be part of the world's hope and not its fear, its love and not its hate, so we may know in new and deeper ways the great mystery of life that connects us all. As Unitarian Universalist minister, the Reverend Elizabeth Tarbox writes, "Let us find each other in a changing world. Let us experience love as something that exists, a possibility which is. Let us know that we are alive and being renewed miraculously each second. That impermanence gives to life its freshness and surprise. That our memories of yesterday and our expectations of tomorrow make now a cherished, precious, eternal moment. Que así sea, bendito sea. May it be so. Blessed be. Amen.